Part 4. True Ancient Philosophy and the Way of Pious Living. The Platonic philosopher Celsus, around AD 180, wrote a book against Christians entitled Aletheis Logos, which did not survive. However, Origen's Contra Celsum preserved certain fragments, one of which runs as follows. There is an ancient doctrine which has existed from the beginning, which has been maintained by the wisest nations and cities and wise men. The wisest nations are those famous for their philosophy or mysteries: Egyptians, Assyrians, Indians, Persians, Odrysians, Samothracians, and Eleusinians. J.C.M. van Vinden argues that Aletheis Logos really means true wisdom instead of true doctrine, as it is held by H. Chadwick and other scholars. But this academic controversy is not very important for our subject. Celsus simply states the common belief of his time that religious and philosophical truth shines more brightly at the beginning. In other words, he speaks about the primordial tradition, be it a tradition of wisdom or philosophy. He even makes no distinction between the philosophy proper and the mystery cults, because he speaks in the same breath of Eleusinians, who are not a nation in any normal sense, and the Assyrians, who built a huge empire and whose name in Roman times was used rather loosely. Clement of Alexandria also affirmed the existence of an ancient philosophy which may be found all over the civilized world, because every nation had its own philosophers and sages. Therefore, he argues, I think that it was in the realization of the great benefit accruing from the sages that all the Brahmins, the Odrisei, the Getae, and the people of Egypt honoured these men and made philosophy a public institution, and examined their words as sacred texts, together with the Chaldeans and the inhabitants of Arabia Felix, as it is called, and of Palestine, and a considerable section of the Persian people, and countless other peoples in addition. For the modern scholar, it is quite uncomfortable to find some ancient philosophy, even in the south of Arabia. Therefore he is happy to dismiss this and other similar accounts as crazy tales. But it is well attested that early Christianity, for instance, regarded itself as a prolongation and fulfillment of an ancient philosophy. Therefore, let us see how the true philosophy is described by the early Christians themselves. According to Justin the Martyr, who wrote Dialogue with Trypho the Jew at about AD 160, philosophy is really the greatest and most honourable thing man can possess. It alone brings us to God and unites us with Him, and truly holy are those who apply themselves to philosophy. What philosophy really is and why it was sent down to men has escaped the masses, otherwise there would be no Platonists, Stoics, etc. It follows that philosophy is sent down to men, and ultimately based on a divine authority, because true philosophy alone brings us to God and unites us with Him. Being the knowledge of being, episteme to ontos, philosophy is knowledge of God, of what is true and truly exists. To see God is the aim of Plato's philosophy, so Platonism is viewed as being close to revelation, surely sent down to Plato. In Justin's dialogue, Trypho the Jew raises the following question. Did not all philosophers in all their discussions discuss God? Do they not investigate His sovereignty and providence on every occasion? And is inquiring about the divine not the task of philosophy? For Clement of Alexandria, philosophy is a form of the practice of wisdom, and wisdom is the scientific understanding of things divine, human, and their causes. Since the Lord Himself says, I am the truth, Philosophy, being a direct gift of God, includes questions concerning truth and the nature of the universe. Those philosophers who receive their knowledge from the supreme truth, God himself, are the true initiates. Clement of Alexandria says that there is only one truth, but different paths from different places join it, just like tributaries flowing into a perennial river. He is not very impressed by Hellenic philosophy, which in his opinion shows a skill in sophistry, and in many cases seems to him to simply be a power operating on the imagination, using arguments to implement false opinions. Therefore, along with Hellenic philosophy, likened to a little fire, stolen as it was by Prometheus, which blazes up helpfully into a useful light, a trace of wisdom, Clement discerns a non-Hellenic philosophy which comes directly from God and is based on divine knowledge and faith. Following already established tradition, he argues that the Hellenes themselves borrowed much of their wisdom. With great satisfaction, Clement quotes Megasthenes, the author of Seleucus I to India, about 350 to 290 BC, who wrote in the third volume of his History of India. However, all that has been said by the ancients about nature is also said by philosophers outside Greece, the Brahmins in India, and the people called the Jews in Syria. Drawing necessary information from Alexander Polyhistor's book On Pythagorean Symbols and other Hellenistic sources, Clement also claims that Pythagoras was a disciple of Sonchus, the highest prophet of the Egyptians, Plato of Sechnipus of Heliopolis, and Eudoxus, the Cnidian of Conupus. In addition, Pythagoras is claimed to be a pupil of the Assyrian Zarathus, and even of the Brahmins. For Clement, truth is one and under the soul of wisdom, but the philosophic schools, whether Hellenic or not, are like the Maenads scattering the limbs of Pentheus, each boasting their own limited claim as the whole truth. Clement cannot deny that the term wise is applied to sophists in the scripture, so as to describe their excessive concern for language and technique. They labour throughout their lives over distinctions between words and the appropriate combination and groupings of expressions. Are they real bearers of wisdom? Clement cannot provide a clear response. Perhaps they are if they belong to Clement's party, and if wisdom is regarded as the inherited property of Jews and Christians only. For the truth vouchsafed to the Greeks is not the same as ours, even if it does share the same name. The Christians attempt to present themselves as adherents of true ancient philosophy, supposedly deviated from and partly corrupted by the Greeks, were caused by concrete historical and theological circumstances. The early dialogue and contest with Hellenism was a prolongation of the Hellenized Jewish tradition, which tried at all costs to show its superiority over Hellenism proper. All possible rhetorical and mythological tricks were used in order to demonstrate that Plato is simply a thief and imitator of Moses. Since Christianity stands between Hellenism and Judaism, it is not too surprising that the followers of Christ Logos sometimes described Socrates and Heraclitus as Christians. The seeds of truth which they cultivated are owing to the sowing Logos, the Logos spermatikos, to whom all truth found in mankind should be ascribed. The Logos doctrine itself has Egyptian roots. It is attested by the so-called Memphite theology and other texts. According to the Christian writer Eusebius, every nation has a guardian angel who is responsible for sending down certain knowledge, which is not, however, always complete or correct, because some of those guardian angels can neither see the invisible nor ascend to the supreme truth. Thus, for example, the Phoenicians and Egyptians were taught to worship the heavenly elements, the visible heavenly bodies. For Eusebius, religion, or devotion, eusebeia, and philosophy are not separated, but constitute a unity. Christianity is simply the restoration of the true ancient philosophy, because even before Moses' time, human beings had their pious philosophy. Therefore, Christianity is in fact a very ancient way of pious living, paleitaton Eusebius politoima, and a very ancient form of philosophy, archaeotata tis philosophia demonstratio evangelica. However, Eusebius cannot refrain from exoteric particularism in his assertions about the deficiency of pagan philosophy and religion. Wherever it contains the truth, it has been stolen from the holy books of the Jews. This widespread opinion is a sheer fantasy, but it stems from the mythical belief in the exceptional status of Jews. Thus their holy scripture becomes the only source of wisdom and the very handbook of philosophy. Neither Egyptians or Assyrians, nor Persians or Indians could share such an extremist claim and opinion. The Greeks had their own political and cultural myth, which consists in asserting the superiority of Hellenism. Once the Hellenes were pupils of the ancient civilizations in matters of science, religion, and mysticism, but they were also able to give a rational foundation to the doctrines of ancient nations, e.g. those of the Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Phoenicians, so as to transform and develop them. Origen expresses this idea as follows. Celsus praises the barbarians for being capable of discovering doctrines, but he adds to this that the Greeks are better able to judge the value of what the barbarians have discovered and to establish the doctrines and to put them into practice by virtue. Ascasi pros aratin contra celsum.